Thank you. So thank you, Christina, for a very optimistic outlook, and I guess I'm going to try to give you guys a solution, the final solution that we've been waiting for all day. So, as Christina also mentioned, everything that we're doing here is going to have to be according to the One Health principle. It doesn't really, we can't really focus on only one disease, or only diseases in humans, or diseases in animals, or livestock, or fish, or only focus on antibiotics in the environment. We're going to have to look at everything under one umbrella, under the One Health umbrella. So we need a kind of a holistic approach to everything. There is just so much the pharma industry can do. We can help out with new antibiotics. However, there is the market failure. We here in Norway, in particular, as was mentioned, we have the narrow spectrum penicillins. We are a small market, and here in Norway we also have among the lowest prices of medicines in Europe. So a low volume combined with a very low price is not necessarily financially viable solution. So we also have this political goal here in Norway to have the lowest prices. Yes, it's good, but it could actually be too low as well. So we would like to see more of a sustainable pricing, particularly for these old antibiotics, so we can keep them on the market and still use them while they're still effective. We can have a better use of vaccines. Here in Norway, we are now implementing or working on a vaccination program for adults. We have a very successful program for children, but now there is one for adults coming as well. And there's also the non-antibiotic treatments that can be used instead of the antibiotics, such as phage therapies, light activated medicines that are non-antibiotics. There's also the diagnostics, the rapid diagnostics, as was mentioned. It's not really the pharma companies necessarily working on the diagnostics, but they are also very important. And also reduce antibiotic waste into the environment. I guess you've seen the documentaries as well on NRK about the antibiotic discharge into environment in India. There are ways to solve that. We can here in Norway we can put requirements for public purchasing on antibiotics, to ensure that antibiotics that we purchase is not from such manufacturers. And there are public policies being worked on as we speak, and will be implemented here. Does it matter if Norway does it? You could say no, not necessarily, but we could be leading that work as well, and others could follow, and then it would matter. And then we would have a consumer demand from not purchasing antibiotics from such manufacturing sites. Just to give you an example of what vaccines actually means for antibiotic use. Here you can see the antibiotics used in fish farming in the 80s. That top was in 87. We have introduced effective vaccines, and the use of antibiotics has dropped, and now we're using about 1% of the antibiotics in fish farming in Norway compared to the 87. At the same time, we have increased the production of salmon and trout by about 20 times. So developing a new drug is very time-consuming, and it is very, very expensive. This also goes for antibiotics. It's not just antibiotics. It is for everything. So there is and of course the return of the investment on these expenses is necessary. So this is some statistics made by the European Industry Association, and it shows that about 2.5 billion euro for bringing one drug to the market. It was mentioned 1 billion earlier, but this also it includes all the fails and all the the post-marketing work as well with the drugs. It is a very high failure rate, as have been mentioned, so it also comes into account with the cost of the drugs. So for the market failure, as has been said earlier, there is a cost of development. You will get an income from the sale, and that is what is also the basis for the approval and the reinvestment. If you can't have any income after the sale, you can't use any money on the development, and then you will have no approval. It is scientifically, it makes sense, as was mentioned, not to use new antibiotics, and the current market mechanisms promote use of the drugs. And that is also how the current system has worked, the patent system. Okay, well, I'll get back to that later. So, well, push mechanisms that has been mentioned is for pre-approval activities to leverage the activities before approval. There are several programs for this kind of push mechanisms, and IMI, Innovative Medicines Initiative, is one of them. It is a private-public partnership in Europe with a total budget of 700 million. It has several task force focusing on gram-negative, gram-positives, and resistant gram-negatives as well as Christina mentioned, the Drive AB that has been looking into how to get more investment into the antibiotic research. Yes, so that's why we need. So that was push mechanisms. Sorry, we also need the pull mechanisms to come. That will come after approval. That gives the pharmaceutical companies, the developers, that will get a reward for getting a product on the market. And yeah, as was mentioned, also wealthy countries should pilot such a model. And we've been hoping that Norway also could be doing that. But it's it's good to see that Sweden is doing it as well, our good neighbor. The priority list could be a guideline for selecting candidates for receiving these kind of pull rewards. Yeah, but we haven't landed on if it should be this list or it could be expanded or narrow. But this is a very good starting point for discussing what kind of drug candidates should receive the rewards. Giving rewards for R&D to the pharmaceutical industry is not really a new sport. This is something that we have been doing for quite a few years already. The patent has been debated earlier today. So I'm just going to talk you through a bit about these IP rewards, intellectual property rewards. The patent is for 20 years, but afterwards we can have the supplementary protection certificate. It is some call it a patent extension. It's not an extension of the patents, but it is a supplementary protection preventing market entry for competitors. It is a compensation for the lost time for the regulatory process. So this patent system has worked very well, and that has given us all the drugs that we have on the market today. But then there is the market failures. There is also a regulatory data protection that comes on top of the patent that lasts for 8 years, meaning that a generic cannot enter the market during the first 8 years. Even though the development of the product, even if it takes 20 years, there is a generics protection for 8 years. So that this is a regulatory protection outside of the patent law. There is also what we have the pediatrics. The pediatric research is now an integrated part of the drug development. Before you can apply for marketing authorization for a new drug, you need to have approved a pediatric investigation plan, a PIP. And in this PIP, there is a list of studies you have to do on the pediatric population. If you complete that within a set number of years, you will get a reward, which is a 6-month extension of this SPC. 2 years if it is an orphan. I'll get back to that. So this is for the pediatric. This is kind of the research incentive number. Well, that was number 2, the pediatric. The second is the orphan, which is a market exclusivity, and that is a research incentive for rare diseases and for serious conditions. You get reduced fees, early scientific advice, and you can have risk-benefit assessment of smaller data set. And you get a market exclusivity for 10 years. This 10-year market exclusivity is a very strong IP protection. It is actually stronger than the patent because the patent only protects your active ingredient. But this market exclusivity is a protection for a total indication. So it is a stronger protection in total. So these are the today's complete set of IP regulation for pharmaceuticals. And there are strengths with them, and there are some flaws. For the orphan regulation, did it fail? Because you can make a risk-benefit assessment at this point, at the marketing authorization, that here you assess the risk of the drug against the benefit. And when you have a serious condition and you have a very small patient population, you can do that on a smaller data set. Meaning you will have a smaller data set also for the later evaluation for cost efficacy analysis. And when you have a smaller data set, you have a large uncertainty in the efficacy. And that causes problems in some countries when it comes to the cost effectiveness analysis. So some countries can't really say yes to using the drugs because they don't know how effective it is. So did it fail? Not really sure. The incentive works as it was set up, and that was to bring new products to the market with marketing authorization. Pediatric regulation, did that fail? Not really. It has brought a lot of new pediatric studies. We're doing more pediatric studies as a part of the global study. There are a lot of new medicines on the market now, and we reached 1,000 PIPs last year. But there is this. It also had this PUMA, pediatric use marketing authorization. And that is development of pediatric indication on existing medicines. And we haven't really seen any use of this PUMA regulation within the pediatrics, because we do expect an off-label use from the old medicines that are going to be used in the pediatric indication. So this would be a marketing authorization, like a protection of this drug specifically, only within the pediatric use. But then you would have a generic alternative. And we would expect that the generics would be used off-label for the pediatric indication. So this is a good example to see how economic incentivized off-label use actually removes the incentive for this research. So R&D for antibiotics. It should stimulate research, development, and approval of the substances. You should have low use of the substances and also very wide access. Within, of course, the antimicrobial stewardship. And that is why we propose these two kind of pull incentives, which is transferable exclusivity extension. So it means that you get a market exclusivity for another product than the antibiotic. It doesn't really matter if you extend the patent or the exclusivity for the antibiotic itself, because it's not going to be used. So if you get a market exclusivity for a drug that is going to be used, then you will have an income from that product. And then you're transferring the value from another therapeutic area into the antibiotics. And also a part of this transferable exclusivity extension is the word transferable. If you don't have a product on your own in your company that you can use it on, then you can sell it to another company who has, and then you can get an income from the sale of this exclusivity. And then there's the second option is market entry rewards, and that is a payment to a company that launches a new antibiotic. It could be a single payment or a serial of payments to these companies, and that would also be, it would be addressing a predefined, it should be for a predefined medical need, like the WHO list of medicines. So both these cases would work. It would incentivize new antibiotics, research into new antibiotics, and we think that these would be viable options for the pharmaceutical industry. There are also some regulatory hurdles. So there are a variety of regulatory requirements for drug license approvals around the world. So there's one set of rules that is for Europe, another set of rules for US, and a third for Japan. So we need a harmonization for antibiotics. So we can have one set of clinical trials that is accepted in all regions. So there is some work under the way with these three regions. There is also some for new therapies that are actually unknown to the regulatory framework, such as the phage therapies, bacteriophages, that is viruses that specifically attack bacteria and will kill the bacteria. That is there are products on the market today, but not as pharmaceuticals for humans. But it's actually used in fish farming today. So you put this virus to the water where there's fish. If there are introduced some bacteria, the viruses will attack the bacteria, and you will have a low number of bacteria in the water, and the fish is keeps healthy. So, but this is entirely a new concept, a new technology to approve as drugs, and that is also a challenge for the medicines agencies around the world. So it is some groundbreaking work that needs to be done for approving new kinds of therapies. I also mentioned antibiotics in environment. So we've been assessing whether if we can have regulatory requirements for discharge into the environment. So we try to see if we can have that in the GMP regulations, good manufacturing practices. But that only focus on the quality of the product and not the wider aspects, such as environmentals. So the industry is actually taking action on that themselves, and I saw, I think it was in October, they published the first list of acceptable discharge concentrations from manufacturing sites. So there is work being done on that as well, but not so much from a governmental point of view. This is the last slide. AMR it is a big problem and it is complex, but that also means that there are a lot of weapons to be used in this complex battlefield. If we need, well, I've actually heard someone say that we don't really need new antibiotics. We can use all the other weapons to tackle AMR. I'm not really sure, but if you need new antibiotics, we also need a new system, a financial system for stimulating the development of new antibiotics.